My lungs screamed with the kind of agony I'd foolishly thought was behind me. The air, sharp with the scent of ozone and singed metal, ripped into them like shattered glass. I tried to cough, but a ragged wheeze was all I could manage. Breathe, Evans. Come on, soldier, breathe, the voice rasped through my helmet's static-laced comm. Sergeant Harlow. It sounded impossibly distant, tinny. I blinked, the world swimming in and out of focus, trying to force my protesting body to obey. My vision started to tunnel. Black spots danced at the edges. I could feel the world slipping away, but panic wasn't an option. Not with them so close. I forced my gaze to the gaping rent in the bunker wall, shredded metal framing the jagged opening. The air beyond pulsed with an eerie lilac glow and the chittering screams that made my blood freeze. The Xenoth were almost here. Harlow, My voice was barely a whisper, rasping pathetically against the cacophony around me. Save your breath, Evans. Get back on your damn feet. That was Harlow. Always the picture of pragmatism and harsh motivation. We'd been lucky, in a way. A lucky break was a relative term when you were stranded on some forsaken moon at the edge of the known galaxy, fighting a race of insectoid freaks more nightmare than biology. This outpost wasn't even strategic, it was a glorified fuel stop humanity was trying to cling to with broken fingernails and blind hope. The Xenoth had rolled through, a chittering wave of razor-limbed savagery, taking us utterly by surprise. That lucky break was that I'd been on perimeter patrol when they hit, the rest of my unit trapped in the bunker. They'd fought tooth and nail, buying me what pathetic time they could. I'd made a breakneck sprint toward the outpost's armory, praying to a god I barely believed in that I wouldn't be too late. I wasn't. But it was clear that not too late didn't equal we are gonna win this, boys. Most of the armory was gone, blown to hell, leaving me only half a dozen hastily salvaged grenades. I'd barely managed to scramble back to the bunker before the things overran it. Harlow's comm crackled again. Evans, report. Where the hell are you? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think. We were pinned. The last few guys were probably barely holding on. The Xenoth would punch through any minute now, and that'd be it. Another speck of dust conquered in their relentless crusade across the stars. I could go out there, a suicidal one-man last stand, grenades blazing. Buy them a few extra seconds, maybe. Or. My gaze snapped to the bunker's secondary exit, concealed in the back. It was a long shot, a gamble so desperate it made the other option look sane. But desperate was the order of the day. Harlow, I rasped, my hand fumbling at the emergency release. I found something. I hesitated, hating the lie. The hatred gave me a twisted sort of strength. My heart was hammering, but it was do or die time, literally. Something. What the hell are you? Harlow began, but his voice cut off mid-word, replaced by a shriek that sent ice down my spine. The Xenoth had breached the bunker. I triggered the release, the heavy barrier hissing open to reveal a narrow, dimly lit maintenance corridor. Get your ass out here, Evans. You owe us that much. Harlow's voice was a ragged cry now, filled with a desperation mirroring my own. On your six, I whispered, not sure if my comm was even picking up my words. Then I sealed the bunker, leaving them to their fate. It made me sick, made me something less than human maybe. But a sacrifice only had value if it meant those left behind could make it count. The corridor stretched before me, a claustrophobic tube lined with pipes and pulsating with the sickly glow of emergency lights. I had no idea if this even led to an external exit. It was a ghost of a plan, born of nothing but the grim certainty that the alternative was the chittering chorus of my friends torn apart. If there was a merciful God, they'd at least make it quick for them. Each thud of my boots resonated in the deathly quiet, mingling with the pounding of my own terrified heart. The further I got from the bunker, the more a sinking feeling settled in my gut. What if this was a dead end? What if I crawled out of a hole just in time to join them in whatever grisly banquet the Xenoth had planned? A sharp, acrid smell began to permeate the air. My stomach lurched, my skin prickling with a primal, panicked certainty. I was getting closer to the Xenoth. I heard them before I saw them, a chorus of clicks, hisses, and guttural sounds that echoed through the corridor. It was the stuff of nightmares. Every survival instinct in me screamed to turn back, to just get it over with, but I forced myself onward. They rounded the corner ahead, a grotesque tide of glistening carapaces, razor-sharp limbs, and eyes that burned with a hungry, alien intelligence. My breath caught. 4 of them. Too many for grenades to be remotely effective. They paused, heads swiveling in unison towards me. I froze, the blood roaring in my ears. Then, as though dismissing me as an utterly insignificant threat, they continued forward, clicking and chittering amongst themselves. It couldn't be that easy. It had to be a trick. And yet, as they flowed past, not even sparing me a second glance, a wave of disbelieving relief washed over me. I was invisible. My gaze followed them, their hunchbacked forms lumbering down the corridor, oblivious to my presence. An odd detail snagged my attention, a metallic sheen on their backs, something boxy, modular, harnessed to their carapaces. An uncomfortable realization blossomed. This wasn't just a hunting party. They were carrying gear. They were consolidating their gains on the outpost, likely ferrying supplies to their main force. I stumbled back, my head spinning. They'd taken the outpost, yes, but not entirely secured it. Meaning? A desperate kind of hope crackled through me. If I could follow them, I might find their staging area. And a military staging area, even a Xenoth one, meant the possibility of heavier weaponry and tech. It was the craziest, most reckless, going to get us all killed plan I'd ever even thought of, let alone contemplated acting on. But it was literally the only option floating in front of me that didn't involve my corpse being added to the Xenoth's collection. Besides, I owed it to Hollow and the rest. It was the least I could do after abandoning them. I crept after the Xenoth, staying well back, my heart thundering like a drum solo in my chest. Each step felt like a mile, each rustle of my uniform seeming to boom in the echoing silence. But my strange luck held. The creatures paid me no mind, focused entirely on their task. The corridor opened into a wide cavern studded with bioluminescent growths that cast an eerie pallor over the scene. The Xenoth were clambering into something like a transport, a segmented, leggy monstrosity that dwarfed them in size. Definitely their staging area. My gaze swept frantically across the space. It was littered with the detritus of our outpost, weapon fragments, ammo crates, and, blessedly, a few heavier ordnance launchers. One had even been left intact, a small miracle with the level of devastation I'd witnessed. But, like a bucket of ice water to my heated hopes, I realized there was a problem. A big, chitinous problem. Xenoth warriors swarmed around the transport, guarding its perimeter, chattering amongst themselves. There was no way I could get close to the weapons without being spotted and shredded. Unless... A spike of adrenaline lanced through me. My eyes narrowed, taking in the bulk of the transport, its numerous jointed legs, the way it squatted low to the ground. The Xenoth continued their oblivious loading duties, their heavy cargo boxes disappearing into the segmented belly of their monstrous vehicle. This was it. My one, insane chance. I didn't even want to think about the possible consequences if I screwed this up. With a silent prayer, I slipped off my backpack and crouched low, easing it under the belly of the transport, inch by agonizing inch. The cavern stank of something feral and sour, a scent that mingled with the cold sweat trickling down my spine. Each scrape of my pack against the rough ground felt deafening, but the Xenoth warriors remained oblivious, preoccupied with their cargo. Finally, the pack was nestled as far as it would go, tucked amongst their segmented limb joints. If I got under there, I'd be hidden. As long as the beast didn't decide to suddenly shift or take an early departure. I glanced at the weapons cache. So close and yet a universe away. It was decision time. I could ditch the pack, risk a desperate scramble for the launcher, and probably die in a blaze of alien gunfire. Or I could gamble everything on the terrifying possibility riding alongside the Xenoth in their own biological war machine. The memory of my squadmates, their voices echoing in my head, pushed me towards the transport. It was the kind of madness that got soldiers killed on countless battlefields across history. But the truth was, I was likely dead either way. This at least offered the ghost of a chance, a sliver of possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could turn this debacle around. Holding my breath, I rolled onto my side and squeezed into the cramped space beneath the transport. My nose scraped against something slimy, and I almost gagged. I lay absolutely still, heart pounding against my ribs as the stench of the Xenoth washed over me. Every inch of me screamed in protest. Thankfully, the segmented belly concealed me completely. All I had to do now was wait and pray they didn't decide a pre-departure bowel movement was in order. My body ached with tension as minutes crawled by. Finally, a discordant shrieking filled the cavern, the Xenoth scrambling into the transport's upper section. One of those grating clicks sounded right above me, followed by the groan of stressed metal and a lurch that sent my stomach churning. We were moving. I gripped the frame of the transport, nails biting into cold metal, my teeth clenched against a cry of pain as we bumped and jostled over the uneven cavern floor. Each second was agonizing. All it would take was one curious warrior poking around the underbelly, One random jostle too far, and my cover would be blown. The comm unit in my helmet was dead silent. Had the Xenoth overrun what was left of the outpost entirely? Were survivors even a possibility, or was I clinging to a futile hope? I fought back a wave of despair. No, I couldn't afford to think like that. There might be someone still waiting for a miracle, and I had the means to make that miracle happen, no matter how impossibly stupid it was. My head throbbed, my body screamed for relief, and all around me echoed the skittering and guttural chatter of the Xenoth. It felt like hours cramped in this metal prison, but it must have been only a short while. The transport juddered to a halt, the sudden inertia nearly sending me flying. Hushed clicking reached my ears. The hatch was opening. Showtime. This was it. I didn't know what was outside, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not when a chance, however slim, beckoned. I sucked in a lungful of the foul air, then wriggled free from my hiding spot just as a Xenoth warrior dropped down in front of me. It tilted its head in surprise, then let out a piercing shriek. Before it could raise an alarm, I was on it, a clumsy grapple that was more desperation than skill. The creature fought back with shocking strength, those razor limbs slashing at me. Pain exploded across my chest. It twisted, trying to bring its mandibles around. Then a blur of brown and black hurtled into the fray. Teeth, razor-sharp and impossibly powerful, sank into the Xenoth's leg. A howl pierced the air, the creature stumbling, its attention diverted. I was barely aware of what was happening, only the need to make this count. I scrambled for the fallen grenade, pulled the pin, and shoved it into the Xenoth's thrashing body. There was the briefest instant of confusion in those multifaceted eyes, then they flared wide with the abrupt understanding of its fate. Get out! I screamed, scrambling backward, the creature's shriek of rage echoing in my ears. A split second later, the cavern was rocked by a blinding flash and deafening explosion. I was thrown backward, my ears ringing. Scrambling to my feet, I coughed through dust and smoke. Around me, the clearing was a scene of absolute chaos. Xenoth were scrambling in every direction, some injured, others reeling in confusion. The transport lay on its side, smoking and sparking, its segmented legs twitching sporadically. But what drew my eyes was not the alien devastation. Bounding through it all, a symphony of muscle and fury, were the dogs. They were huge. Not just bigger than any dog I'd ever seen, but wrong, somehow. Their coats were sleek and short, brindled like a tiger's. Their muzzles were blunt and powerful, their eyes glittering with ferocious intelligence. And they tore into the Xenoth with a calculated brutality that chilled me to the core. One swat from a dog's paw shattered a Xenoth's arm, sending it flying. Another's jaws locked onto a leg, its unnatural strength apparent in the way it dragged the screaming alien like a ragdoll. They fought as a pack, flanking and circling the disoriented Xenoth with terrifying efficiency. The outpost had a secret, a dark, last-ditch defense. It wasn't tech, it wasn't hidden nukes, it was them. These genetically engineered warhounds were our trump card, a terrifying testament to the lengths humanity would go to defend itself. I'd heard whispers, rumors about what went on in the classified labs deep below headquarters. This was the horrifying reality laid bare. Despite the chaos, a path lay open to the rest of the outpost. Survivors. They were out there, they had to be. And I had the means now, thanks to our monstrous secret weapons, to get to them. I whistled, a shrill, piercing note that cut through the din. The dogs, in the midst of their bloody symphony, paused. Their heads swiveled towards me, and I felt the weight of those unnatural eyes. Hunt, I choked out, pointing toward the remnants of the outpost. Hunt. And they did. Loping off in a blur of dark fur, they became shadows against the smoke, disappearing towards the tattered remains of our base. Now, it was my turn to make this opportunity count. I bolted into the bunker's smoke-filled interior, hacking and wheezing. The emergency lights flickered on and off, painting the world in a sickly, strobing yellow. Movement, a desperate scramble away from me, caught my eye. Don't shoot. The voice was hoarse, barely recognizable as Harlow's. Easy, Sergeant. It's me. Evans. A deathly silence descended, then Harlow emerged from the shadows, weapon shaking in his hands. His eyes widened in disbelief. Evans? You how? Crazy story, for later, I managed, coughing. Are there others? Harlow nodded dazedly, and the rest of them materialized from the gloom, wounded, exhausted, utterly demoralized. They stared at me like I'd risen from the grave. I didn't blame them, I felt more like a walking corpse than a returning hero. The Xenoth, they're in disarray, I explained, catching my breath. There was an unexpected development. I'd never forget the way they gaped at me when the dogs loped into the bunker, blood painting their muzzles, alien viscera clinging to their claws. The silence was deafening. Finally, someone choked out, "What the hell?" the words echoing a sentiment we all shared. The explanation was long, twisted, the kind only war makes. Classified programs, genetic horrors unleashed as a last resort. It didn't excuse anything, but it put things in a brutal perspective. These soldiers, my squad mates, looked not at loyal hounds, but at monsters straight out of humanity's darkest impulses. It chilled me, even as the awful necessity of it all made a sick kind of sense. Their leader, a hardened veteran named Corporal Ortiz, his face etched with fresh scars, was the first to break the tense quiet. "So, what now? We owe our lives to those things." His voice hung in the air, dripping with disgust and a kind of awed horror. We all knew the answer. To survive, we'd become the monster tamers, leading these unnatural beasts into battle. But that was a worry for later. Right now, survival was a matter of cold calculation. The Xenoth were rattled. We could press that advantage. "We take this chance and hit 'em hard," Harlow rasped, the fire of defiance returning to his eyes. "Get to the radio tower, send out a distress call. With luck, reinforcements won't be far behind." The plan was risky, desperate. But in that desperate moment, fueled by adrenaline and the sick, twisted reality we now inhabited, hope felt possible again. I tightened my grip on my rifle, meeting the gazes of my fellow soldiers. There was weary resignation, but also the beginnings of a grim determination. "One problem," Ortiz said, pointing at the bunker exit. The dogs had returned, but they weren't alone. 2 Xenoth corpses lay sprawled before them, dragged back like grotesque trophies. And snarling, straining against the dog's powerful grips, was a live Xenoth, fear blazing in its multifaceted eyes. "Looks like someone wants to talk," I grunted, a twisted flicker of amusement passing through me. We'd gone from the brink of extinction to interrogating an alien prisoner, all because of our 4-legged nightmares. There was a bleak sort of humor to it. But as I watched the dogs, their eyes burning with unnatural predatory intelligence, it wasn't humor I felt anymore. It was a dawning horror, and a realization that might just be our ultimate plot twist. In this desperate bid for survival, in this war against an alien threat, we might have unwittingly unleashed something worse. These dogs weren't just weapons. They were beings of horrifying power and intelligence, products of a science that teetered on the brink of losing control. And now, the hunter may have become the hunted. We secured the prisoner as best we could, a feat more akin to wrestling an enraged cobra than anything resembling proper interrogation protocol. The Xenoth thrashed against the makeshift restraints, shrieking and hissing in its utterly inhuman tongue. We humans huddled back, a grim picture of soldiers turned zookeepers, none of us willing to approach any closer than those snarling muzzles would allow. Getting anything useful out of it was going to be a problem. None of us spoke Xenoth, and the thing clearly wasn't interested in learning English anytime soon. And while the old harsh interrogation methods trope was tempting, we all had a sinking suspicion that those razor-sharp limbs and acid for blood weren't its only defenses. The dogs seemed just as unnerved. They paced in agitation, whining in a low, unsettling tone. Even after the battle, they weren't the relaxed companions you'd imagine. They were more like unexploded bombs, barely contained power simmering beneath their brindle coats. "We can't stay here," Harlow spoke the thought we were all having. "We need the comm tower, and we need it clear of the Xenoth, yesterday." I glanced at the restrained alien, and then back at the warhounds. An idea, reckless and born of desperation, began to form in my mind. "Maybe there's a way they can understand each other," I said slowly. The silence that followed was almost comical. Then Ortiz barked out a laugh, harsh and humorless. "You want to play translator between a bug and our bio-engineered nightmares? You really have lost it, Evans." Yet, the idea wouldn't let go. There was something in those dogs, a raw, hungry intelligence that echoed the cold calculation I'd seen in the Xenoth's eyes. Both were predators, born of different nightmares, but predators nonetheless. "They need to communicate," I insisted, the realization sending a jolt through me. "They need some way to understand each other's tactics if we're ever going to make this coexistence work." Harlow stared at me, the gears turning behind his exhausted eyes. He wasn't a man prone to leaps of faith, but out here, in this desperate, alien-infested landscape, faith was as rare as a working air conditioner. The plan we hatched was a testament to that desperation. With shaking hands, we carefully removed the makeshift muzzle from our prisoner. The Xenoth immediately launched a vicious, screeching attack, confirming our earlier suspicions about its less than cooperative nature. The dogs surged forward. One, slightly larger than the rest, some twisted alpha instinct at play, pinned the Xenoth to the ground with shocking ease. The bunker echoed with the sounds of a struggle that transcended the boundaries of predator versus prey. There were hisses, growls, and agonized shrieks that sent shivers down our spines. The air crackled with tension and the ever-present threat of this entire thing blowing up in our faces, quite literally. Yet, as the seconds bled into minutes, an unsettling quiet descended. The snarling faded, replaced by the scuffling of claws on concrete and the Xenoth's panicked chittering, rising and falling in an odd, rhythmic pattern. The lead dog stared down at the captive Xenoth, those unsettling eyes blazing. Its low growl pulsed like an alien heartbeat, each guttural sound carrying an echo of the other creature's vocalizations. "Is it talking?" Ortiz whispered, his scarred face drawn. I didn't answer. I knew, with a certainty that was as terrifying as it was exhilarating, that I was witnessing something momentous. This wasn't just our desperate attempt at communication. This was the dawn of a new battlefield strategy, one as dangerous as it was potentially powerful. This was the moment humanity and its canine monstrosities formed an unholy alliance. And this was the moment, staring down that twisted tableau of predator and prey, that the true enemy became horrifyingly clear. It wasn't the Xenoth trapped in our bunker. Our fight for survival against them was only a skirmish in the looming shadow of a far greater war. The war was against ourselves, against the darkness rising within humanity, embodied in those watchful, unnervingly brilliant canine eyes. They mirrored our own desperation, but with a terrifying, unchecked potential. We had unleashed these creatures, and even if they helped us win against the Xenoth, what happened afterward? As the lead dog turned a chillingly thoughtful gaze on us, a wave of dread hit me. Survival had just become infinitely more complicated. We had won this battle, perhaps, but the real war for the soul of our own humanity was just beginning.